6-hour train ride from Anchorage to Denali. And the further north we got, the more snow there was, but also the bigger the mountains got. Imagine 30 Mount Hoods all next to each other, and then right behind them, 2 Mount Hoods on top of each other. It's incredible. All the cabins in the park for employees are dry cabins because the ground is frozen so much of the year. There's no toilet, there's no shower, there's no sink that you can turn the water on. I was born in India, and my family is there half the time, and when I go to visit them, we have wells that pump water into the house once a day, and it's not that easily accessible. It's not like you turn a faucet on and you just have drinking water. It's something that I was so familiar with, these small inconveniences. The study I was working on started 13 years ago, and it's meant to quantify the relationship that humans are having on the wildlife in the park. Since the 90s, they've noticed a sharp decline in wildlife viewings. There's one road that runs through the length of the park. Historically, if you got on the road, your chance of seeing a wolf was over 90%, and now it's less than 10%. And we're trying to understand what effect are these buses having on the wildlife. Doll sheep give birth in the outer range, which is to the north of the park. And they have to cross this road where potentially there's a bus coming every 5 minutes. And these buses are big, and they're loud, and they're carrying a lot of people, and they have an effect. If 3 or 4 buses are stopped to see 2 bears meeting, then what effect does it have on the bear? And then at the end of the season, we take all of that data, make suggestions to our superintendent about how we could adjust the schedule of the buses. And because it is so remote, people get really angry that they traveled so far and they want to see moose, they want to see bear. It's really hard to tell them, well, if we keep sending people out, there aren't going to be any bears and moose. They're going to travel to park where there aren't people, or it's going to cause them so much stress that they might not make this year. Female bears with young cubs hang out by the road because they know that wolves or other animals that might be threats will stay away because they don't like the buses. The downside to this is that I lived in this very small cabin with one of the Student Conservation Association interns, and she really liked to party. She really, really liked to party. One night, I had gone to bed early because I had to get up before 5. She'd had some drinks, and she was making some noise, and I fell asleep while she was doing it. And the next sound I hear, thinking that it was her, and I walked to my front door with a blanket around my shoulders, and I cracked my bedroom door open, and I smell this really intense smell. It confuses me, and then my eyes kind of adjust, and just 3 feet in front of me, I see the form of a black bear right in front of me. And as soon as I realized that it was a bear in front of me, I screamed. It was completely involuntary. You're not supposed to scream. I screamed. And the bear freaks out, my arms fly up in the air, and the bear starts running towards the door, and I slam my bedroom door shut, and I stand there for a second, and I open the door just slightly again to see if it was gone, and I didn't see it in the cabin, so I raced to the front door to slam it shut, and we're face to face again. The bear is standing on our front porch, just looking at me with its head peeking in the door, and I wanted to see if the coast was clear to be able to come back in. So I'm shocked again, seeing the bear right there, and I grab the door and slam it shut on the bear, and I lock the door. I turn my back to the door. I turn the lights on in the house, and the front door to our cabin has, the window that you can peer out and see what's in front of you. And I couldn't look through it. I was too scared to look outside to see if the bear was still on our front porch. And my roommate, after all that commotion, after like doors slamming and me screaming, she comes out of her room and her eyes are just wide. And I say, "There was a bear in here." She's like, "I thought that's what it might have been." And for an hour after that, the bear circled our cabin. We have our own system of 911 to get in touch with emergency responders. But I go through the whole protocol. I say, "Yeah, this is Brenna, and I am from cabin 664, and I tell all the things. He's like, "Okay, Brenna, what's the purpose of your calls?" "There is a bear in sea camp." And all pretense drops. He's like, "What?" He was so shocked. And a ranger whose main purpose in the park is to sort of mitigate human-bear interactions. You know, if there's a bear attack or if a bear is getting into trash, he would be there to haze the bear. So an hour later, he shows up and he is able to get one beanbag round off and hits the bear in the butt, and the bear was never seen again. Thank goodness. I had a very strong reaction to it. I think I was very pale for 24 hours. If we have trash and we have good smelling things and my roommate makes fried eggs at night and leaves the door open, a wild animal's gonna come in because we lived in a wild place. But because we are protecting ourselves, they're the ones who really suffer. If he had returned, he would have been considered a threat. I'm thankful the bear didn't come back. We can get so stuck in one idea in one place in our immediate surroundings. I had some friends over yesterday and we were talking about politics, nationalism as a whole rising movement. We saw it happening in Great Britain and here in the US, and it's happening in India. So much of that has to do with one boundary, one the British left after they had ruled India for 200 years. They drew one line on a map and created Pakistan and India. Now here we have people that have lived side by side for thousands of years that practice their faith in different ways, and overnight there's a division, and since then for 60 years there has been this unrest that has culminated in what we now have in India, which is this rise of Hindu nationalism because of a line on a map. But Wolf doesn't know that on a map somewhere there's a line and they're protected inside that line and they're not protected on the outside of that line. When you look at the park and you look at Denali and you just see a mountain, you don't see coal plants around it that are affecting the wildlife. You don't see these big timber harvests that are happening because that affects the salmon populations, which affect bear populations, which affect everything. Being able to visualize that is really interesting to me. It sort of helps me piece it together. My relationship with my past and my relationship where I am now, and my relationship with places that matter to me, and all those connections. I was born abroad, and then we lived in the South. I've had these really, I consider them very fortunate experiences as an Indian woman to live in places that there are really no other Indian people, either in Sweden or in Southeast Alaska or in Denali, even in Portland. I'm sort of a novelty here because there are not that many Southeast Asians. A very inspiring thing about Alaska that you don't hear too much about is the sense of community. These are small places with a small number of people, and everybody really looks out for each other. Before I left to come back to Portland, I celebrated India's New Year in the park and cooked a lot of Indian food with Alaskan ingredients. But I made this big dinner and invited the wife of our superintendent, who's like the biggest boss in the park. And she went out of her way to research what Diwali was and then made little gift bags for everyone attending because she just wanted to support the event and connect. There's just more time and space to be outside. And I think that has just a really positive effect on how people talk to each other and treat each other and how they move through the world. We were probably 2 hours outside of Fairbanks, and there was a hitchhiker on the side of the road. He had this black jacket on with a rough fur lining on the hood of the coat. He gets in, and I ask him what he's up to, and he told me that he's from Eagle, which is a small native village on the border of Canada, and that he had spent the fall hunting for moose. I grew up vegetarian. I've never eaten meat. I've never wanted to kill an animal. I wouldn't even catch a fish and throw it back in the water. We had seen a lot of hunters. They were using those trails to bring their ATVs in, and they had these huge gun racks. We were heading up this trail, and this woman had a sleeve of ammunition, these enormous bullets lining her entire arm, and these guns sitting next to her. She's like, "How is the hike up here? I bet it's easier to hike it than it is to take an ATV up it." I was like, "No, lady, it's not. I don't know what you're doing." So this is sort of the quintessential hunter that I've always interacted with or in my mind. I started asking him more questions about his process, and I told him about the people with ATVs that I saw, and I asked him if he used an ATV. And he said, "No, we don't have funds to do that, but really you just go out into the woods with a rifle on your back." And he said that he never took a shot unless he was sure that he could get the animal and kill it. And he never took a shot if he didn't think he could carry the meat out. And he told me so many interesting things about subsistence hunting and sort of the life that they've lived in this village around hunting for caribou and moose. And in Alaska, there's a mandate that one family can only take one caribou per family. And he went out of his way to tell me that if he and his mother and brothers lived that way, they would starve to death. So he usually killed 3 or 4 caribou, but because they lived in this village and it was against the law to kill more than 1 caribou, they equally distributed the meat amongst all the villagers so that everyone would be liable, and that's how they got around it. I had so much empathy for him and what that must be like to live in this really remote place, to live off the land, feeding his family through a really long winter. I mean, the population of all of Alaska is the population of Portland. It's possible and sustainable for people to take enough meat to survive the winter. What's not possible, what's not sustainable, is that people from all over just come to kill animals for their heads, or come to kill animals because they want the thrill of it. And I feel like it's really important for me to remember that it's not so simple, it's not just killing more meat is wrong or hunting is wrong. But there's a lot of history and there's a lot of intentional ways to live without the greed of over-extracting a resource for personal gain. Being able to see a different side of something where before it felt very black and white to me. Challenge the way I think about things and what I think really matters, and also what fights I want to fight. What do I feel like would have the biggest impact? Where can I do the work that would lend itself to conservation in ways that I think really matter? Not to take away food from a family. When he found out that I had traveled to the park and was heading home after my birthday, he offered this small jar of preserved salmon that he had in his backpack, which I'm sure he didn't have a lot of because his pack was so small. I remember being a kid, probably 8 or 9 years old, and we were traveling back to India from North Carolina and had traveled through the night, through the day, and we had landed in New Delhi in the middle of the night, so it was a 4-hour train ride, and first train didn't leave until 6 a.m., so we ended up staying at the airport, and finally, an hour before the train station opened, my dad got a taxi and took us to the train station. It's hot. And I remember my eyes adjusting when we got to the platforms. It was quiet because the trains hadn't started running. And the entire platform, for as far as the eye could see, was covered with people sleeping. And I was so confused by it. Like, I just didn't understand why people were sleeping on the grounds, outside, at a train station. In my mind, at that time, I thought, this is like a big sleepover? So I asked my dad. And my dad said, they're very poor people, and they suffer a lot. This is where they sleep every night. And that hit me so hard. I was devastated. Why didn't they have beds? Why didn't they have pillows? And my dad, to his credit, he let me be upset. Let me just have my moment. And then he said, you can't help them now, but you should make yourself strong, and then you can help them. I think what's really struck to the heart of me and shaken me a bit is sort of the vulnerability of certain populations, which I could connect to the vulnerability of certain ecosystems. I think they are related. I think that if we lose sight, as we all are bound to do, of what I hope is really important to all of us, this idea that we can all thrive. That doesn't have to be just a small percentage that thrives. I just feel like I have been given so much opportunity in my life to learn and to experience and to travel and to grow, and it's all worthless if I don't do something with it, if I don't use it in a way that gives other people an opportunity or makes space for other people. And I feel like I am strong, and I feel like I can help. So I'm gonna try.
Yeah, that's good. It's good. Yeah.